I'm not getting any sound.
All right, can you guys on Zoom hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, we hear you great. Yeah, it looks like we're ready to begin. Good evening, it's Monday, July 10th of 2023. This is the City of Stoughton Plan Commission meeting. We do have a quorum and we are certified in compliance with open meeting laws. So the first item would be approval of the minutes from June 12th. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I will move to approve.
And is there a second? Second by Bradford. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? That motion carries. Next item is City Council Representative Report. Alderperson Caravello.
Thank you. It looks like all this action took place at the June 13th council meeting, and Ordinance 15 of 2023, that motion failed. And Ordinance 16 and Ordinance 17 both passed, and Resolution 92 of 2023 was tabled.
Okay. Any questions about that? Hearing none, we'll go to staff report.
Contained in your packet is just a summary of some of the more recent projects. One that I was just going to highlight is there's been a lack of activity over on the Popeyes project, as the community has let us know. We found out that they had a shipment issue with steel, so something got altered in their schedule, so they should be back on track here soon.
All right. Any questions about anything else in the reports? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the preliminary plat for 1, 3, and 4 within the 51 West subdivision. And we do have a need for a public hearing. Anything we need to cover before we go into the public hearing?
I can just give a brief overview if you'd like.
That'd be great.
So this request doesn't change the use of the land. I'm going to pull it up on the screen here. But these parcels were part of the original plat for duplex buildings, two-family buildings. This would allow the lot to be split to allow for zero lot line parcels to be created on each one of them and allow for separate ownership. So they're creating a condominium as part of that process. I'm sorry, a plat. This is not a condo plat. This would allow for separate ownership of each of the parcels. Each lot would have one half of a duplex on it, or twin home. Gonna get to a different screen. Lots 1, 3, and 4 are located in the northwest corner of the Highway 51 West subdivision, as shown on the screen in the yellow locations. Again, this doesn't change the use from the site, but it creates the division of these lots to allow for these to be split off. It requires going through a preliminary and a final platting process because of the creation of this number of lots on these parcels. With that, I think you'd be ready to open it up for a public hearing, Mayor.
All right, any questions before we go into the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll close our meeting and we'll reopen for the public hearing. I did not have anybody signed up to speak. Is there anybody here or online that wanted to speak? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and then reopen for our regular business here. And what are we looking for tonight, Rodney?
There's a resolution in the packet. This would be ultimately a resolution recommending approval of the preliminary plat to the council. Council will take action on the preliminary plat. After that's done, we would expect them to submit a final plat very similar to the lot configuration as approved as part of the preliminary plat. The resolution is written very similar to other resolutions related to a preliminary plat. This one's a little unique in that we're not creating roadways or dedicating public areas. This is really just splitting the lots to create these separate building parcels.
Any questions? Alderperson Caravello.
I just have a quick question, Rodney, about, or for the developer or applicant, perhaps, maybe. I'm just curious, and I may have asked this question when we've discussed this in the past, but how common or unique is this kind of setup with the I'm trying to look for the description here. I mean, these kind of twin homes on this type of lot. Is this, how different or common is this, I guess?
Separate ownership of duplex facilities are very common in Stoughton. Actually, the city of Stoughton is one of the first cities in Dane County to enact an ordinance to allow for that to happen through the zero lot line, which is more of an administrative process. In our world, it allows for ownership at a reduced price point, and so it's quite common. And I think there's generally people tend to feel more obviously ownership, but more pride in the ownership in this area. I think it would be very appropriate.
And I would just add, in Dane County, when I go to the meetings with cities and villages, quite a few of the other cities and villages in the county are getting more and more requests for zero lot lines, as they are more affordable than the single family homes. And the duplexes that are being built right now are selling faster than they can build them, so it's a really popular item right now throughout Dane County, but especially Stoughton. Any other questions or comments? Alderperson Maskey.
Item number 2, the park fees, is that different than normal?
Item number 2.
Final plat will include notation informing prospective purchasers of obligation to pay park improvement fees.
We include that notation on the final plat. There is always that requirement. It's an
Right.
additional notation to allow prospective buyers to be aware of that.
Isn't that usually done by the developer when they are platting?
The park land portion of it generally is part of the platting,
this is part-
but as
park
park improvement fees are
Okay.
paid at the time of building permit issuance.
There has been some examples. I think Nordic Ridge was one where they did pay the park impact fees ahead of time because they wanted to build out the park to help sell the lots. But I think this is the most common approach, isn't it, when they pull the permits?
Yeah, it's the strategy we've used on all of the more recent plats because park facility fees can change over time. Sometimes a latter phase of a development doesn't actually get constructed, and so the fees may increase based on changes. So that's why it's really incorporated based on the building permit issuance time.
Right.
All right, any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion for the resolution. Commissioner Bradford, do you want to make that motion? Yes. All right, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Schumacher. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Next item, number 8, preliminary condominium plat for property at 839 to 981 North Page Street.
So this is actually related to a condominium, unlike the first one was a subdivision. The condominium process in Stoughton is very similar to a preliminary plat and a final platting process used for subdivisions, in that they have to submit both for the condominium platting process as well. Shown on your screen is essentially the complex of buildings and sites that are contained on the site that they look to create a condominium related to. This would allow them units to be identified as condos, and the description outlines the existing buildings as well as the vacant lot known as 839, which may be built on at a future time. The applicant's online if there's questions for him as well, but certainly if there's questions for staff, we'd try to answer them. or if there's questions that arise during the public hearing, we can answer them as well.
Are there any initial questions before we go into the public hearing? So, Roddy, this is kind of a, what I would call, what is it, a mixed use? Is that what you would call this? I mean, there's...
Well, it's, I believe it's actually zone plan business, but certainly multiple buildings. This isn't approving additional buildings, it's really splitting or creating the units within this area to allow for them to be sold under a condominium process or ownership arrangement.
These are commercial buildings, or are they?
Some are storage buildings, some are commercial buildings with tenants.
Okay. Any Alderperson Schumacher?
I have a lot of questions on this one.
Okay?
I mean, I just, which buildings are gonna be converted? What happens to the tenants in there, the other usage of the buildings? This, to me, seems like, even though it's preliminary, is preliminary to preliminary, because there's not even a concept here of what, I mean, I know what the buildings are on that lot, but I have no concept and cannot envision what the developer is looking at doing with this.
Yeah. So as you can see, maybe not very clearly, but you can see there's unit 839 is this vacant parcel in the bottom left-hand side.
Yep.
Unit 925 is the back portion that has the storage units on it, encompassing this area. And then this front parcel is the multi-tenant commercial facility that has the gasoline stations. Just because they create condominium units doesn't mean they have to be sold off as such. They may still continue to lease out the spaces to the existing tenants. The applicant's on the line, and you can ask that as part of the public hearing, but it allows for the sale of these areas to be done separately, but it doesn't require it.
So maybe a question for the applicant, is the intent to be able to spread out the costs of services, or what is the motivation here?
Hello everyone, my name is Al-Zaidi. I'm the owner in my building that see that own and operates this facility. And my motivation behind growing condominium was that gas station part of the business is a volatile industry, and we had an option to sell the gas station alone, but we were very much interested in keeping the rest of the buildings. So we contacted the city and we were told we cannot really make separate parcels out of it. So commercial condo was the next idea that we had in mind, and that's the reason we filed this application. But we are very much interested in keeping the rest of the building the way it is. We have a liquor store in there at 961. 971 is a pizza place. MCA 977 used to be a laundromat. We are no longer going to do laundromat, but we have rented it out to a place that sells stuff online on Amazon. We will continue to own it, operate it, and we also operate the storage unit ourselves. Besides that, there are no other intentions.
Any follow-up questions? I know it was a little hard to understand the microphone.
I'm sorry, the acoustics were so bad I could not understand it.
Okay.
Did I type a message? Would that help?
No, it's on, I think it's on our end.
I don't know if it's on our end or not.
Either way, it's.
I think what I heard is they're going to retain ownership of some of the units, and then I didn't catch what was happening with the rest of them.
Selling off the gas station.
So we are only going to sell the 981 unit, which is a gas station.
981 is the gas station, okay. All right.
And as part of the contract, that the gas station portion of the building plus the island pumps and the storage tank is the area that we are planning on selling. Just of the building, including the storage units and the empty lot, we want to own and will continue to own in the foreseeable future.
So then you'll have a condo agreement between all the owners for like snow removal and those sort of things? Is that what you're doing?
Yes.
Okay. Does that help? Any other, did you have any follow-ups, Alder Schumacher?
I guess you just have to wait and see what the plan is for it. Preliminarily, I mean, there's plenty of space in order to work on that site for sure. But as far as how the logistics of the existing businesses and how you can make storage units into livable units, I'm just unsure.
No, not livable units.
All right, nothing's
The
changed.
uses remain the same. Sorry if I wasn't clear. The existing uses, the storage unit buildings will remain storage unit buildings.
Got it.
The pavement surfaces will remain as shown here. The buildings are not changing as types and/or uses. What it allows for them to do is sell off that commercial building for that commercial, or that lot for that commercial use. Again, the pavement and the building structures are not being altered as part of this approval.
Okay,
The
all right.
condominium creates the land in common to allow for the internal circulation to remain. Unlike a subdivision, we're not creating an area which you have street frontage for all these separate parcels.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have, as the mayor suggested, potentially common maintenance practices and/or shared access across the properties, and therefore the need to utilize a condominium platting process to identify the units of the overall lot area.
I think we have something, I'm gonna call it similar, up at Kettle Park West, and even out by where Papa Murphy's is in the strip mall there. Sometimes the snow plowing, the landscaping and that, they have a condo association, or in some cases, they just have separate fees in order to cover those additional services that they need, but they tend to split those costs.
I got it. I was under the impression that this was like a redevelopment of the space.
Nope, it's allowing it to continue as it is with different ownership
it.
structure.
Okay, that makes sense now.
All right.
And only the parcel that's designated unit 839.
Yeah.
That's potentially, at some point in the future, maybe gonna be
Something.
retail space, which is now vacant. right?
Yeah, that would have to come back through planning commission review and action, potentially even rezoning, depending on what they'd want to do there.
All right, that clarifies a lot. Thanks.
All right. Okay, I think we have a need to,
Hold the public hearing.
yeah, have a public hearing. So we close our regular meeting, hold the public hearing. Nobody signed up. Is there anyone that would wish to speak at the public hearing? Hearing none, we would close the public hearing and we'll reopen for a recommendation to the council. Any questions? Otherwise, I would entertain the motion. Is there a resolution in there?
There is,
Yeah,
correct,
it just
yep.
hasn't caught up to me yet, or I'm not on the right screen. I would entertain a motion for the resolution.
I will recommend that we move this resolution to council.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Farrell. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None opposed, that motion carries. Item number 9 is certified survey map for property at Shelley subdivision. And this one here, you want to do an overview of this one?
Yeah,
Looks like there are a couple items on this one.
Yeah, there will be a CSM and a rezoning related to this property. On the screen is the applicant's request for the creation of Lot 1 and Lot 1. You might recall, or some of you would recall, the Shelley Court subdivision is an existing subdivision that hasn't been developed. It's been platted as such, so Shelley Court is a platted corridor. It's not improved. The city has entertained options or ideas to modify that plat over time. On the illustration, you can actually see an area that's mapped as wetland, and that extends from the Shelley Drive back to the west. As part of the process to further develop Chalet Court or any other area north of Lot 1 and Outlot 1 would require that wetland to be processed for an exemption potentially. And if that's able to occur, that might allow for additional lots to be constructed along Chalet Drive. The overall intent is, as you may recognize, is their desire to actually vacate Chalet Court and to develop 3 duplex parcels along Chalet Drive without any further expansion to the west. However, given the wetland situation and the fact that Chalet Court has not been vacated, the only option that they have to pursue that goal is to utilize the certified survey map process to create Lot 1. Outlot 1 is also created as part of the CSM. That's really the remnant area of lots 9 and 10 of the Chalet Court. Outlot 1 would be unbuildable as it stands by itself. Lot 1 would be created. The subsequent action or request is to rezone this to allow for a duplex structure to be constructed on it. So that's really the 2 items that are on your agenda tonight related to this item. The first one is to create the certified survey map that would create this 1 lot as well as Outlot 1. And you can see that's being done in the footprint of existing lots 9 and 10 of the overall subdivision. So it doesn't alter the dedicated right-of-way both on Chalet Drive or Chalet Court. It really just manipulates the lot lines of 9 and 10 of the existing subdivision to create 1 buildable parcel that faces Chalet Drive and would be serviced off of Chalet Drive. The applicant is here if you have questions for Mr. Nelson as well.
Are there any questions on the certified survey map? Alderperson Caravello.
I'm just looking at what appears, I'm thinking that the broken line is the signifier for the wetland setback, and I see part of that broken line in what's designated as Lot 1. What is the impact of that situation?
There's a 75-foot setback from the wetland, so it would still allow for a construction on Lot 1, but they couldn't build within, and the setback would prevent it from happening anyhow. You see that line is very close to the north property line. We had them to depict that on here, even though the wetland, this portion of the wetland is likely to be vacated, or not vacated, the delineation, they've got an application in to potentially reduce the size of this wetland. This has primarily been caused by potentially stormwater or street water that comes off at this point, and that might be allowed to be exempted over time. But prior to that being changed, they would not be able to build within 75 feet of the mapped wetland. So this does show that line that they couldn't alter.
And I think the initial intent was to build all 3 duplexes there along Chalet. And I was told there was a change in, I think it was state law, on some of the wetlands items. So he's looking to at least proceed with the 1 lot while he works through, the issues related to the law change. Is that?
Yeah, there's some rules being drafted related to wetland determinations and how they're classified or processed. And right now that's not in turmoil, kind of in a holding pattern right now until that drafting of those guidelines are established. So right now they can't issue any exemptions or a wetland determination letter at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I know there's also been some conversation about the area where the bulb is, I'm going to call it. And my understanding is there's conversations about that property, of the city potentially taking ownership of that property. Obviously that hasn't been decided yet, but I think that it would be, from what I'm hearing, difficult to build that, and I think that's why he's vacating the road.
Yeah, the vacation of Chalet Court, or the discontinuance of this right-of-way, hasn't been initiated yet, but certainly that would be, I'll say, the next steps that would have to occur after this, if any additional development would want to occur even to the north of Outlot 1 or Lot 1. So that would have to occur prior to that. As part of that, that'll be the discussion as to whether there will be additional lands dedicated to the city for open space, preservation of the wetland area certainly will be a part of that. But for this scenario, this would allow for at least construction to occur on the lot, the newly created Lot 1 as shown.
All right, any questions? I know that's kind of a lot to absorb, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And then you would anticipate at some point coming back with the CSM for the rest? Is that what would happen?
Again, next steps are going to be several. They have to finalize the wetland issues. They'd have to go through the vacation or the discontinuance of the chalet court, and then probably process another certified survey map for any development to the north of Outlot 1 that's shown here.
Looks like everybody's in deep thinking on this one.
Well,
Go ahead.
I recall this coming to council a few years back, and there was some severe blowback from the neighborhood on this. How does this change from the first situation?
I think much of the discussion was about preservation of the open space in the wetland areas. I'm not trying to characterize all the discussions, but there was a significant focus on maintaining and potentially expanding the public space in that area. The creation of this one parcel seems to allow for development to occur. For example, in Lot 2 as it currently exists on the frontage of this chalet court, this existing chalet Lot 2, could essentially be constructed on right now if the zoning was proper for it. Because it faces Chalet Drive, services could come off of that. But it doesn't create probably the building envelope that would be appropriate for at least a twin home. And they'd still have to respect the 75-foot setback line. So that would further encumber, if you look at just existing Lot 2, it extends to the north to this Chalet Court property line. Whereas creating a deeper Lot 1 allows for that to occur with appropriate frontage and depth, and still essentially preserve that 75-foot wetland buffer.
So I think the area where the bulb is more than likely won't be developed, and I think that's where the biggest concern was for the neighbors, because there's a lot of trees. It's kind of sunken back there. It would take a lot of grading anyway, even if it's allowed. And some of it I think was a privacy issue. There is an easement that the city has that goes through there somewhere as well and kind of comes out by Quick Trip, in between the Quick Trip and the other commercial lot next to it. So I think that for the neighbors, I think this is probably going to be a better situation than what was originally proposed. It's only 3 units. They're all on chalet versus, I think, what was there, 6 units extending back further toward the cul-de-sac. There might have been more than 6 units or 6 lots there.
So there is a public hearing as part of the rezoning
Sure.
item next, so we might hear some other comments from the public.
So what comes of lots, the remaining lots, 12, 13, 14, 15?
They remain as platted, existing. No changes to those lots are part of this certified survey map. Lots 9 and 10 are altered by the amended lot line here.
And if they end up vacating the street, they wouldn't be able to develop them lots, right?
Not as platted, correct.
I have a question, although this is further to the west behind, that like wetland area, but I see there's a spot in there that says park. And is that indicated as City of Stoughton parkland?
So, yeah, and this is resurrecting a lot of history, but when this area was platted, all of these lots as part of the chalet court, there was an area of land that was dedicated as park. That's noted on the plat. Is it utilized as visible parkland? No, but it's certainly preserving the bulk of a wetland area as well. The mayor mentioned an easement. This actually isn't an easement. There's a dedication of minor detail, but there's a dedication of land all the way from Vernon Street to US Highway 51 as part of this park area that you see on this plat.
That leads me to another question, and I'm wondering if the broken line going from the north to the south there, is that, because there's utility lines
Sure.
for like, I don't know who that's, is that Alliant or overhead power lines back in there, so is that an easement?
There probably is an easement even on top of the dedicated lands for that utility purpose.
Okay. I know some years back they came and cleared.
Yeah, I think there's
Everything.
transmission lines that run through there.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? So would this CSM be contingent on rezoning?
So you'll see when we get to the rezoning, I'm going to be recommending one additional item be placed on the rezoning,
Okay.
that the rezoning not become effective until this CSM is recorded. Because the request is only to rezone Lot 1 of this CSM, which is appropriate.
He's doing out lot 1, not lot 1.
No, rezone Lot 1. Because this area is all zoned, I believe, RH, rural holding, which is undevelopable land. Lot 1, if created as part of the CSM, needs to have a zoning attached to allow for the duplex to be built on it. Out Lot 1 can remain the RH.
Yeah, these infills are always complicated. Any other questions or comments on this one? Otherwise, I think we are looking for a recommendation to the City Council and the CSM. Would entertain a motion.
I will make the motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Schumacher. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. And then the next one is the rezoning. We do need a public hearing. Anything before we go into that, Rodney?
Yeah, all I wanted to add was there's one additional bullet that I'd like to have as placed against a condition. And I just mentioned it in the last item, but to restate it, that the ordinance doesn't become effective until the certified survey map is filed to create the parcel. Essentially, you have to create the parcel. We want to tie the rezoning to the creation of that parcel.
All right. Any questions on anything so far on this one? All right. Hearing none, we'll go into the public hearing. I did not have anyone signed up, but if there's anybody that wishes to speak here at the public hearing on this item. Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. We're looking for a recommendation to the City Council on rezoning this single lot 1. I would entertain a motion.
I will move to amend this zoning classification.
All right, so to approve it with the additional language.
With Rodney's
Okay.
addition.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Second by Schumacher. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Item number 11, specific implementation plan for a 2-unit building at 2601 Jackson Street. This is out by Walmart, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is essentially our very near Kettle Park Senior Living. It's on the south side of Jackson Street. It's currently a vacant parcel. They are looking at constructing a 2-tenant building. One would be Anytime Fitness, and the other is an undisclosed, unknown restaurant, at least unknown to us. Sure, I have the hourglass of shame here for a minute. Just 1 second. I believe the applicants or representatives are online. I'll just start by giving you an overview of the site. The west portion of the site, or the building, is really planned to be the Anytime Fitness portion of the building. You'll recognize on the east side of the site, there's actually a drive-through component for a drive-through window that would be placed on the east end of the building. That would allow for the restaurant to provide the drive-through service. As noted in the staff review letter, there wasn't any red flags raised by the emergency services and or the utilities. There was one comment related to the placement of the transformer that would be worked out related to that if this moves forward. There is one staff comment that has to be explicitly included in your approval if you so desire. There's a small patio, if you will, outdoor seating area on the southwestern side of the building, on the back side of the Anytime Fitness, that needs to be explicitly approved as part of the resolution, if you so desire. Adam, are you online, Adam?
I am, yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent.
Can I turn it over? Yeah. Can you fill in the gaps and kind of give a synopsis? My quick little synopsis provided background, but if you can add more insight as representing the applicant, that'd be great.
Yeah, you bet. So in general, it's kind of a unique shaped lot here, and then I would say over half of the southern portion of the lot is taken up by wetland and wetland buffer setbacks for us. So kind of a puzzle piece here to try to fit in the building the developer is looking at, as well as kind of the programming with setting up a potential restaurant user here with drive-through. So that's kind of generally set the framework for how this site is configured. The building, I know, would push back a little from the road, but that really seemed to be the best configuration for, again, staging this drive-through area, getting enough space for the queue lengths in there, as well as maintaining some traffic flow through here to meet the parking requirements. Just some other highlights of note here. We do have the concrete patio specifically. I think the intent there generally is just to, if there ever was a need to maybe have a grill out back or something for some of the members to use, that would be the idea there. So nothing overly extravagant, just a nice feature for the members. Public sidewalk connection kind of leads up to the northeast there through the site. And then in addition, we do have some regional facilities here that take care of stormwater generally, but also the site obviously configured to accommodate the additional stormwater that we need to provide on this site. Happy to answer any other questions here that might come up.
Can you speak to the building elevations and the building characteristics for the group as well?
Yeah, so the building characteristics generally are in line with, I'll call it Anytime Fitness's, their general desire for building facade and materials. I think in general it's kind of consistent with the GDP for Kettle Park West Commercial Center, and the nature here consistent with the look and desire for the commercial center.
Maybe if I can just help the commissioners understand a certain aspect of this. This property is within an already approved general development plan, which already explicitly allowed for drive-through facilities and restaurant facility, indoor restaurant facilities. So that's part of the reason you're not seeing a conditional use application as part of this particular situation, unlike others you've recently seen elsewhere.
Any questions, or Alderperson Schumacher?
Adam, is this the split of the building, is that a symmetrical split, 50-50 split between Anytime and the restaurant, or a different percentage?
Different percentage. It will be 75% approximately with Anytime Fitness and some internal office space for their staff, and then the remaining portion will be for that tenant. So I would say, if you look at the site plan, the parking stall that is just west of the western ADA stall is generally where that split would occur.
Got it. Is Anytime, are they still operating out of that SWAC building or no longer?
I believe the intent is to relocate out of the SWAC building, and this would be their standalone facility.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions? I have one. Can you tell us anything more about the restaurant? I mean, obviously, as a drive-through, is there a dine-in, or?
I think with the amount of space that would be available in here, it may be a few tables that could possibly fit in here for some waiting for a takeout order or something like that. Maybe a couple of dine-in spaces, but probably generally geared similar to like a Emilio's adjacent to the site, generally geared towards takeout space.
So will they have a menu board there, or do they have to pre-order like some of them are starting to do now?
There will be a menu board. Yep, there'll be a menu board, and possibly 1 to 2 menu board or similar boards along the way here. We just don't quite have the details on that, but we would probably have to come back to the group here with that additional information when it's available.
Yeah, I think the concern is the stacking space, and trying to see if you have 1 or 2 lanes there. We certainly don't want the backup to get to Jackson Street would be the concern.
Yep, absolutely. And I think the city minimum is 100 feet of queue length. We've got 145 feet here, so we're a bit above that. It kind of starts as a 2-lane and then would generally get down to 1. And then we also have, it's about just under 50 feet from basically where that last car would be parked to pick up their food to the north, I'll call it the south edge of the drive lane in the parking lot.
Okay. Any other questions from the commissioners? So this one here just goes through this approval process, right?
That's correct. And if you're so inclined to approve it, a yay or nay on the outdoor seating area would be appropriate to include in your motion as well.
I'm not seeing or hearing any questions or comments, so I guess I would entertain the motion. And then, as Rodney said, if you're willing to make the motion, you can let us know if you want to include that outdoor area there.
I'll make the motion on the development, including the outdoor area.
All right. Motion by Schumacher, a second by Bradford, and including the outdoor area. All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? That motion carries. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
You too. Item number 12, annexation request for the property located at the northwest corner of the city west of US Highway 51 between Rutland Dunn, Townland Road, and County Highway B. It's a long description. This one we're going to be looking for a recommendation to City Council, and are you ready for this one?
Sure. So this request came in last month. This request, I think, was introduced as part of the STI development discussion that's planned for the east side of 51. They are working with the current property owner to annex this particular site with the intentions of closing on the property later this month. So STI Holdings or some group thereof is planning to develop this site. And these particular lots along Rutland on Town Line Road, the 3 in the town of Dunn and the 1 in the town of Rutland, would remain. Just today we received the letter that was sent out via email from the Department of Administration finding that it's in the public interest to annex it. With a county greater than 50,000 like Dane County, they provide a letter indicating whether it's in the public interest or against the public interest to annex properties. That narrative is available in that letter, but it was in support of, or it wasn't a negative. It did allow for us to move forward if we so desire. This is within the city's comprehensive plan as an area to be added to the city limits. And as part of our urban service area amendment application, this property was already included in that area as well.
And then this one, is this the one they requested be on the council for tomorrow night?
Yeah, so an ordinance, annexation ordinance, requires 2 readings. The first reading was added to the council meeting for tomorrow night as an introduction to the first reading with their intentions to try to close on this property upon annexation later this month. That would allow for the second reading to occur on the 25th of July.
All right, any questions or comments on this one? Alderperson Cervello.
I am curious if there was any comment or feedback from Town of Dunn on this annexation.
Yeah, in the letter, apparently they provided some comment concerns about whether this creates a town island. And in the DOA letter, there's language that indicates that it doesn't violate the previous rulings related to the creation of a town island. So that's explicitly spelled out as not in it's consistent with previous findings related to town islands. It doesn't create a town island under the interpretations.
Okay, thanks.
Walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's an island. Any 3 ways you look at it. So, with that non-island area being there, how does that work then for emergency services? Does the town then deal with that? What do they do for plowing? What do they do for, tell me how this works.
Yeah, well, obviously police or fire and EMS are already covered.
Because?
They're part of our district.
Yep, utilities as well.
Well, at least electric.
Yep.
They're not provided sewer and water, but
Yep.
yes. So those 3 items, they already fall under our fire district. They fall under our EMS district. Police, certainly those town properties, primary services from Dane County. That's not to say that our police service doesn't extend into areas just outside our borders when a real emergency arises. So that's to address those items. As far as plowing, oftentimes our road crews end up collaborating. Here we'll catch this little side of the road, you catch that, or so oftentimes there's a very good working understanding of who's going to plow what stretch when they get there. I don't think this small stretch of these 3 or 4 properties is going to create any hardships related to that. Just to also expand on that, the city jointly worked with the town of Rutland and the town of Dunn to repave the town of Dunn. And the city had to pay for our portion of that improvement for the frontage of the city frontages along that corridor. So collaboratively, we've worked well on those types of arrangements.
Any other questions or comments?
One more on there.
Sure.
Hinging off of what Tom was talking about, so we'll be able to cover EMS and services in that. What about, would they still then vote in their respective townships if they're,
They're still town properties. They still are governed by their town, their respective towns, town of Dunn or town of Rutland in this case, both. Just another piece of information. I don't know if it's going to occur, but lot 1, one of the parcels closest to 51 in the town of Dunn, that was identified as part of the Highway 51 corridor study as a relocation. So it's anticipated the DOT is going to acquire that particular lot for improvements to the highway corridor when that occurs.
so the island will shrink, Tom. Or non-island, I mean.
The non-island.
They generally do over time.
Any other questions or comments on this one? And this one, we're looking for a recommendation to the council. Is there a resolution in there?
There's an ordinance, actually.
Oh,
Yep.
ordinance, okay, even better. So I would entertain a motion for the ordinance. There it is.
I'll move to recommend the ordinance.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Caravello. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. Item number 13, site plan for a building addition at the VFW at 200 Veterans Road. The one we've been waiting for. We want to tell us about this one?
Yeah, certainly the applicants are represented here as well. This addition would be on the south side of the existing building, primarily to expand or improve bathroom and kitchen and freezer space, freezer and cooler space for their facility. On your screen, you see the general area on the southeast corner of the building is the area in which the addition would occur. In the plan is actually a layout of the area to be improved. The bathrooms on the eastern, far east, southeastern side. It appears there is actually a corridor that goes through the area as well, if I remember right. Yep. And it's got a walk-in cooler and freezer area in the expanded area as well. I'll blow this up a little bit.
Where's the airplane?
Are we missing anything? All right.
Okay. Any questions on this one so far?
Just glad to see the airplane on the map.
The airplane on the...
It is.
Yeah, he noted it.
Yeah, if you've been in there, you know, it's pretty narrow there in the hallway, and they're busy, and the kitchen needs to be increased. The bathrooms are a little tight going in and out of there. I've also spoke to them a little bit and trying to connect them. Maybe you can talk to Gary afterward about if you guys want to talk about any sustainable practices as part of this. He can explain maybe a little deeper on some of the federal money that might be available to help you with that. But overall, you know, I think it looks like a good plan. We're excited for you guys. Sold a lot of fish dinners to get to this point. Or was it the wieners? All right, any questions from commissioners? Schumacher?
Just only my usual advisory, if they're gonna build a freezer and have that as a walk-in directly on an on-level slab, that you get an insulative value underneath that, otherwise you'll tend to, it'll mold underneath it.
You know that from personal experience?
As we're constructing some of our new facilities, we have a lot of on-grade freezers and things like that, and they said that's a gigantic issue because as you're freezing the concrete that it's on, that penetrates in the ground and it becomes essentially a permafrost, but it will mold.
Good to know.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's right.
we have.
That's what brings us back here every month.
We've got freezers about the size of this entire building, so. Yeah, it's a lot of mold. It's a lot of sand underneath it, holy crap.
All right, so the site plan is just strictly this body's authority, right?
Correct.
Okay. And we have a resolution in there. I would entertain a motion. Motion by Bradford. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Caravello. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. Plan development, concept plan for 211 South Water Street. We have a couple, 3 people here, 4 maybe, for that one. What do we have, Rodney?
I don't know exactly how we want to start it, but the gentlemen have put together, they certainly heard what you had to say at previous concept discussion. They've come back with some additional information, and I think they're here to present it. Gary Becker is also here to talk about potential to district planning related to that area as well. So with that, maybe we should turn it over to you guys. And
Appreciate you guys giving us another shot at this. I didn't feel great about my presentation the first time, so I kind of wanted to highlight what we believe are a lot of positive attributes that this will bring to the community. I'm not a very good public speaker, so I thought a PowerPoint would be the most beneficial way to do that. So we're looking for rezoning the current use of 211 South Water Street to full residential, no commercial use. We're going to retrofit the current building, keep the shell. Rodney, if you don't mind going to the next slide. The building on the left there is the current building as is. We'd be looking to remove the ephes, the facade on the north and east sides of the building, and kind of restore the brick, tuck point it, bring it back to a new look as you see on the right. We would not be changing the color of the brick. That was just the best Google image that I could find to kind of give you a feel of how the finished product would look. It would try to maintain the historic character of it, but bring it up to a level that would kind of synergize with the other uses in the area. The interior, we would also do the same thing, try to maintain the historic components as much as possible, keep the exposed brick where we could, keep the steel beams exposed, high ceilings, and then finish it off with some drywall and carpeted living areas to really make it modern, high-end, yet still a lot of the historic attributes. I know, Mr. Caravello, you asked about the rents, and I kind of fumbled through that answer the first go-around, so this was a slide to kind of illustrate. The unit types are targeted rents, and then on the bottom you'll see a table that references the area median incomes. So these would really be truly affordable to folks even making 50% of the area median income. Mr. Becker corrected me on new legislation for workforce housing where I don't necessarily think that definition makes it affordable, as it's 130% of the area AMI, but these would be truly affordable. 100%, but these would be truly affordable units without any income restrictions in place. Some of the economic benefits, the most obvious one would be the increased property taxes. Our projections would have the assessed value increased by 7 to 8 times. We pay $85,000 in park fees based on the 18 units we're proposing, and then we just put together kind of a simple summary of what we believe the tenants would bring to downtown businesses if they were eating, drinking, getting coffee, shopping. We projected that to be in the neighborhood of $150,000 a year to downtown area businesses. Parking, I know that was a concern voiced at the first meeting. We've continued to monitor the parking usage, not only in the north lot, which is adjacent to the proposed building, but also the south lot behind the Kegonsa Plaza. Both lots are generally about halfway utilized on any given time. And then there's also street parking along Water Street and Division Street that we noticed was generally open the majority of the time. So at any given time, we found on average there's about 100 open stalls between those parking areas. We would be asking to designate 15 to 20 stalls in the north lot for our project. just to make it more marketable to the tenants, provide them their own space. And we believe, given the data that we have shown, that there is space for that. We've also met with a lot of the downtown area businesses. A few of them initially voiced similar concerns about parking. We shared this data with them, shared some of the other aspects of the deal, and that kind of eased their concerns. So we're hopeful that would be the case here as well. Sustainability, we'd be bringing new utilities in, new water main, electric service. We talked to Mayor Swadley that could potentially include running the conduit for an EV charging station to the city lot for future use. Working on getting a bid from my brother who works for Everlight Solar to see if that could be an option to reduce utility costs and save energy at the project. Obviously, the simple things like bike racks and living downtown where you work will decrease emissions from vehicles. And then the new downtown TIF district, which Gary will talk about more, but we believe our project could really be a catalyst for this. It's a large project for the area. I know he'll mention a few other businesses that have expressed interest. From what I know of that, most of them are a little smaller. So to do the TIF district, I think this would be a great catalyst for that. And then just the hometown connection. Justin Hansen, my partner on the development, and I were both born and raised in Stoughton, raising our families here, our children here. I actually ran into Mayor Swadley on Saturday downtown getting coffee and donuts with my kids. We try to support the area as much as we can, but really feel that the downtown businesses need more folks there Monday through Friday, just more frequently. We're using KSW as Dean Slaby's behind us as a general contractor. We're going to try to go out to as many local subcontractors as possible. And yeah, if all goes well, Justin and I would definitely have an interest in trying to do this again, or help just with other sites in town that could use a refresh. So greatly appreciate the time again. Hopefully that gives you guys a little more of a visual of our vision of the project. We did talk to Todd Hubing of the Landmark Commission, walked him through what our plans were for the exterior. The interior they don't tend to get into as much, but he said that would be, he couldn't speak for the Landmark Commission, but essentially exactly what they would be looking for.
All right, any questions at this point before we bring Gary up here?
I think my only comment is that I use that lot because I have my office. It's called Breaker right
Oh, sure.
down the street. And I know you're saying a combination thereof, but there are times when I actually can't find a space in that lot during the day.
Oh, okay.
And so, I mean, I know it's all dependent on when you're doing your survey and whatnot, but I do think there are times that downtown does have parking issues, and more we grow, on top of the commercial buildings we've got now, some of them have renovated apartment space, and we'll be doing that. And I'm all for housing.
Sure.
But it does, because we need more housing units. But I do think that either this commission or we need to be planning where are we going to expand parking and stuff in this downtown area with all the renovation projects like this. And I worry about setting some kind of precedent right now with no plans in place for future expansion, dedicating 18 spaces of what we have for public parking right now to a specific tenancy.
Sure.
So I just think that we really need to think about that piece of it. I love the project that people put together, but just that we really need to be concerned about future parking downtown as we do continue to build it. So,
Thank you.
Thank
And just a reminder, make sure you push your mic.
oh,
That's okay.
well,
We all heard you in the room,
I
but I
was
don't
going
know.
to say I've never been told I need a mic.
All right, Alderperson Mayeski.
Again, same concerns as last time. Your parking, you have zero. And you're looking at the city as being this incredibly generous organization that will just, maybe ask you this, put it this way. How much is a parking space worth?
to me personally, to the development,
Right.
I mean, that would have to be factored into, you know,
Well,
projections.
let's just say you own that property. How much would it cost to develop that for parking? And then how much more are you going to charge your tenants because you have designated parking for them? In an area which at times becomes very difficult to find parking, and you can't say it doesn't because we have one commissioner who's just said that, and you go by there in the wintertime, that baby's full.
Sure, yeah, I guess all of our
And
research
so-
has been
And so taking
summer
15
months.
away just because the city is just so generous that we would want to give you 15 parking spaces.
I would like to point out that we would be paying a lot more in property taxes. There would be a lot of other
That's-
economic benefits.
Everybody else pays those property taxes also. It's not a new concept.
True.
So that is still my issue with this, is that you have to figure out a way to get some parking someplace, somehow, you know, or maybe we could rent it to them at a considerably profitable rate for the city. Because we did have to purchase those properties, we do have to maintain those properties. We do not get taxes off those properties. So to just allow, you know, I would like to talk to my neighbors about, you know, my garage is kind of small, maybe just using theirs. I don't think it'll work.
I mean, we are going to try
it.
to maximize parking on site, but unless we were to raise the entire building, there's nothing more that we can.
It's not a problem for me as a.
Correct.
As a older person, and I'll tell you the same thing I tell every other developer. My job isn't to worry about your profitability. My job is to make sure that we get the best quality piece of project we can out of each and every development we get. And this is where this is heading. And
Understood.
And this is your rub right now with this. I like your concept. I like the fact that you want to bring this downtown, revitalize it, but this is a rub. This is a huge rub, and thinking that the city is going to just magnanimously hand over a chunk of property to you so that you can profit from it and get nothing in return is a little hard to swallow.
We'd be very open to discussing leasing stalls as well. But I do think the project should be considered with all the other merits and not just focused on the parking issue. Because as I said, unless we raise the building, we're going to fit as many stalls as we can on the site, but per our architect engineer, that's probably 4 to 5 stalls.
I'm just giving you my...
No, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the concern. We did the best we could of trying to go downtown at all different days, all different times of day, monitor that parking. I know you're probably down there every day, so you see some days that we might have missed. But based on our data, we didn't have or see that it was that large of an issue. But certainly understood, Mr. Mahesky, and we'd be open to other ideas there.
That's something to discuss with the city.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Farrell? Yep.
So if I understood right, this, like any other business in this district, parking is open to everybody, first come, first served, is that correct? There's no parking requirement for a business down there.
There is no parking requirement in the central business district.
Yeah, I remember that distinctively when another project came up and I was worried about parking, and the answer was there's no requirement for parking. So it seems like one hitch perhaps here is that you're asking for designated parking if you were like every other business that was sort of in competition for those parking spaces and you didn't ask for designated parking. I wonder, would that change the opinion of any of the commissioners?
It's not business, it's residential.
Yeah, the designated parking would be ideal, but certainly not something that we would need.
So maybe I can just highlight the distinction I made last time. This property is zoned central business. Residential in the upper and the rear portion of this building is permitted by right. if there's a commercial entity in the first 24 feet of the street frontage. So if there was a commercial entity operation occurring there, they could build, I'll say 14 or 16 units of residential without any parking required.
Which wouldn't change the actual parking situation.
Right.
It just would require us not to need the zoning to be changed.
They're attempting to go through the plan development process to utilize the full building for residential as opposed to utilizing, losing those 2 residential units, if you will. Again, I'm just trying to let you know the distinction here. So they're being honest with you, trying to let you know what they're trying to accomplish, recognizing the parking topic is of interest, but there might be a way that they could end up developing this site without consideration of parking.
All right, any other questions or comments? Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thank you.
You bet. Gary?
The developers have indicated that if this project does get approved, they will need TIF assistance in order to make it financially viable. We're not asking for any actions at this point, but I did want to bring up that we do have a couple of other TIF-related discussions for the next items on the agenda. But I wanted to bring up on this one that if this does move forward, whether or not the Plan Commission reviews the TIF boundaries and the project plan depends on whether we're talking about a blight elimination TIF district or a mixed-use TIF district. In this case, we've been talking to a couple of other downtown businesses who have projects that could go if there was some assistance available to them. So if this project moves forward, it could be a catalyst for a second downtown TIF district. You already have a current TID number 4 is the downtown TIF district. That's at the end of its life. It can no longer incur new expenditures and will terminate in 2025. So a new overlay TIF district could be created for the downtown, and this project could be one of the anchor projects for a downtown TIF district if it was to move forward. Again, whether or not the Plan Commission is the one to review it, that'll be a decision that I'm not sure if it's the mayor or the city council makes as to what type of TIF district it would be to move forward. The basic difference is that a blight elimination TIF addresses blight and preventing blighting conditions. And if you have a redevelopment authority in your community, then they're the ones that review a blight elimination TIF. All other types of TIF districts are reviewed by the Plan Commission to move forward. So that's all, just a little bit of information related to this project as it relates to potential TIF district.
Gary, can you talk about the differences in timing if you were to do one or the other? Your letter suggests it's a little more involved to do the blight elimination and the finding determination of the blight.
That's correct. So a blight elimination TIF district is a little more complicated because we have to go and do a blight survey and determine how much blight and where it is and involve the property owners in that discussion. And so that takes more time to do the analysis, also takes more time to work through the issues that are raised by the whole process.
Certainly, do you have a question?
Was TIF 4 blight elimination?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and I don't know if there's...
No, the riverfront is TID 8. And that is also blight elimination TIF district.
Yeah, I don't know how much of the blight elimination in TIF 4 is left over. And I think that would be something, we could talk about, and then maybe offline you and I can talk about kind of the pros and cons of the 2 different types as far as, if there's any additional resources. I was really hoping that with the state budget and the surplus, some of the programs they put into place would be in the form of grants for downtown districts, especially for this type of housing. and they chose to go with revolving loan. Some of them could be as little as 0% interest, which is good, but the bad news is in the legislation, they put limitations on these rehab projects. For example, they're saying that you can't use a revolving loan fund in a TIF district, and you can't use a revolving loan fund if you're doing historical preservation tax credits, which is really unfortunate because, you know, on these types of projects, we'd want to be able to parlay everything we can in order to help close the financial gap so these projects can actually get done. Especially in the downtown, a lot of the bigger projects, especially we need to upgrade for sprinkler systems and some of them elevators, which are big ticket items. So we're going to continue to lobby, you know, to try to convert those revolving loan funds into, you know, one-time grants, because I just think that'll be better utilized. I guess we'll wait and see what happens at the state level. But in the meantime, we do have two of our own revolving loan funds, and one was through the Redevelopment Authority, and then the other one we just created with the ARPA money. And those are like 3% interest loans, which are great, but it really doesn't close that financial gap when we're trying to crunch the numbers and you're hundreds or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars away. The amount of interest that you're going to save just isn't going to close that gap. So I think that's where when these guys get to the point, then they're crunching their numbers, that they'll have to submit a TIP application. And I think one of the questions we had is there are cutoff periods to create the districts. I think the next one's in September.
Yeah, September 30th is the cutoff date, and the reason that's important is if any new increment was created since January 1st of this year, then the only way to capture that is by creating the district by September 30th. If the project isn't going at this point, then, and there's not going to be any increment in this year, which is unlikely at this point, at this stage of the game, then it doesn't matter if it's created before or after September 30th. So as long as it's created before September 30th next year, we can capture any increment that's created after, it would be after January 1st of 2024.
And I think, you know, we talked about that when we met as far as your timeline, and, you know, if you're going to utilize TIF potentially as one of the tools to close the gap, if that met your timeline, I think you indicated that it may.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the meantime, we're trying to flush out some of these other concerns. You know, personally on the parking, you know, I understand it as far as, you know, providing parking, but we don't have any problem doing that for our commercial businesses. They're profiting too. I don't really see much of a difference from a commercial business prospering versus this type of development. It's all business in my mind. They're just in the business of property management. So I don't really go with that argument. We find a way to find parking spaces when we have huge events such as Sentinel Mai. Not everybody's going to be parked there at the same time. They're going to be coming and going. I think the concern though is if we have more projects like this, then it exacerbates the issue with the parking. But to me, having parking issues downtown, that's a good problem to have. So I'm more than happy to work out and see what we can do. We do have an inventory on the public safety portion of our website that has an inventory of all of our public parking. So I think maybe that's something we can take a look at. Some of it may be as simple as just adjusting the hours or taking a look at our parking lots and see if there's availability to try to free up some more spaces. So I think there's some things that we can do internally to maybe try to create more spaces in the downtown. But definitely, long term, if we do more projects like this, I think that might be more of a concern. We do have more people working at home, so we have to recognize that as well. There's a lot of variables that have changed since our ordinances were put into place. And I know we've been having some internal conversations about trying to update some of those ordinances that might be a little bit antiquated. So But these are definitely, good discussions to have at this level. Go ahead. I see you pushing your button. Go ahead.
I remembered. That's amazing, right, by itself. Yeah, I don't necessarily, I see what you're saying and that everybody can use it again, but that's where I draw the line. If the residents there want to take a chance on moving there and being able to park their car at night, just like somebody going to a restaurant, sure. But I think to designate for a particular builder and a particular project with no cost to that developer, I don't agree with it at this point.
And I certainly understand that, but charging the developer for the parking spots is not going to create more parking spots. So
We can
if that's
charge
the
tenant.
issue, then that doesn't solve the problem.
Well, there are places, I come from outside Stoughton, where they do parking permits for tenants in an area when they do a planned development around a shopping center and apartment buildings and that
Sure.
kind of thing. Where they actually get a sticker for their car, they pay so much a month or so much a year, and that's a tenant expense. Yeah, so I
Right.
mean, there are ways to handle it.
Yeah, and I think that's, where internally we'd have to have some conversations, because now you're talking administrative fees and enforcement and those type of things. And internally we have to do an ROI to figure out whether or not it's even worth, our time and investment to issue a permit. We already have those discussions on licenses, like chicken licenses, for example. Is it really worth the trouble of paying somebody, with salary and benefits, $30 an hour to permit a chicken license? That might be 20. It's just not cost effective for us to implement some programs like that. So these are really good discussions, and it's the type of thing that we usually talk about around budget time. Go ahead.
I think what you're hearing from this commission is that you need to start having that discussion internally, and not just say, geez,
right.
we should possibly have one. No, you need to have that discussion.
All right. Oh, duly noted. I can certainly reach out to other municipalities and try not to reinvent the wheel here and see what, if anything, other like communities are doing. But I just fundamentally have an issue charging people for downtown, and I have a fundamental issue with ticketing people for being downtown. We're trying to encourage people to be downtown. Why would we have a disincentive for them to do that? Whether they want to live there or shop there or whatever. But that's my personal feeling. Opinions vary, and I recognize that as well. Commissioner Farrell.
Now, this is for Director Shield. In the letter, you say there appears to be ample downtown parking to accommodate the proposed apartments. Is that based on what the applicant has provided or
Yes.
staff?
Yeah, and
So for staff
again,
review.
I think you're looking at just the entire region. We're focusing on the north parking lot. Everybody wants to park right in front of their place of business or their house. If we look to the other side of Main Street, the parking lot on the south side is utilized significantly less, and I think the numbers bear that out. So there might be some opportunity for people to utilize the parking on the south side of Main Street.
Okay, so that statement that you made is based on what the applicant has provided, but you concur with that
I do.
assessment? Okay. Then, personally, I love this project. I think it's desperately needed downtown. I would support it with the exception of dedicating parking spaces. I think they should be like every other business, and first come, first serve on parking spaces, and that's my take on it.
Thank you.
All right, so where do we go from here?
I think the applicants are obtaining feedback. Then this is the first step in the process, introducing the concept plan. As they've done in the past, they take your feedback. Ultimately, they'll be putting together likely a rezoning request to rezone it and see where that goes. But they're also trying to work through kind of the TIF discussion and understanding what opportunities there might be there. They've heard the discussion about the need to talk about parking and the parameters that might be associated with that, or the ideas that might come as part of that discussion. So I'm hopeful that they heard, well, I know they heard, but I'm hopeful they take away this as positive reinforcement to consider those items and see if they can put together a package that's supported by the commission and council.
All right, thank you. Good discussion. Thanks, everyone. Next couple items are, first one is TID 6. Is that something, Gary, you're going to go over?
Yep. We've had a couple of actual TIF requests have come in the past month. And the first one that we're going to be talking about is the Emmy Roth TIF request. The city was talking about creating or amending TID number 6 during the first phase of their development. As you know, near the beginning of the year, Emmy Roth started developing the site out there. That site is not in TID number 6. In order for the city to capture the increment, which it would like to do in order to pay for upgrades on adjacent Williams Drive, that TID would have to be amended to include the Emmy Roth site into the TIF district. We've recently formally received a TIF request from Emmy Roth for the second phase of their expansion, which is a manufacturing plant on the kind of the north side of that site. And so in addition to the Williams Drive expansion or improvements, we'll have a TIF request that is in the process of being evaluated at the moment by Ehlers. We don't know yet what their recommendation is, but the TID amendment would have an amount for improving Williams Drive, for making a TIF award to Emmy Roth, for improvements to the railroad tracks that serve the business park on the south end that B&G Foods are currently using. And then also a workforce housing initiative, which we don't know what that means or what that looks like, but there is opportunity here to have some kind of workforce housing initiative within a half a mile of this area, just because of this is your business park, an important business park to the city. Your local employers are having trouble finding employees, and the cost of housing is an issue that feeds into that. And so this is an industrial development TIF. The whole purpose of this TIF district is to promote industrial development. And so to the extent that workforce housing is impinging or affecting the ability of this area to develop, that becomes an eligible project cost under this TIF district. Yeah, and so we're including that. We'll include it in here. We'll discuss it and see how far it gets. We don't know how much money should be allocated at this point to it, or what you would want to do with that. That requires further discussion. So for tonight's meeting, this is just the first where we're talking about the general boundary of the TID amendment and these initial project costs that we're thinking of. The next meeting, we'll have a financial analysis from Ehlers, and they'll lead the discussion about what the finances of this TIF would look like. But we wanted to get the boundary in front of you, as well as these couple of project cost items. There's a few other maps in here that talk about current and future zoning and land uses, which nothing is really expected to change. This is being zoned as a planned development. I think the other zoning there is industrial, but this is being developed as an industrial land use. So the maps are showing that. There's still some vacant lots out there, as you know. The city has a couple of other lots designated for stormwater. And then these maps show the half-mile radius. So the tracks are to the south of TID number 6, but they're within the half-a-mile radius that allows TID expenditures to be used for items that affect the TIF district or that are in line with the purpose for which the TIF was created. And then that one is just a bigger view of the half-mile radius for both the amendment and the original TIF district.
Does anybody have any initial questions on how the TIF works? I'm not sure everyone's been through this. A lot of it will go through the finance committee because we have a policy that they follow, and usually the TIF application goes to them, but this group is also involved. But basically what happens is we create a district when you anticipate there's going to be some public improvements needed. So typically what happens is somebody takes out a loan for roads, maybe utilities, infrastructure to serve the property. And then as the buildings go up, the improvements, as they're called, go up, the property taxes from all the taxing authorities, the city, school district, Madison College and Dane County, all those tax collections come back to pay off the debt. And then at the end of the life, you know, the hope is that the TIF district will cash flow, and then you close it, and then everybody gets a big jump, because right now the base value is usually raw land, which is very low, and once it's built out, it'll be up here, and so everybody wins when the district closes financially. So that's kind of the tool that's being used in Wisconsin, and the most common one is what we call the mixed use, which would include commercial and residential, but there's a few different types of TIFs that are available. Some would be like the blighted one, could be a brownfield, which is typically contaminated sites, could be a greenfield, which is basically, you know, what commercial properties are out at Kettle Park West. The other thing, you know, about the TIF districts is it's really used, you know, to encourage more economic development, and as the regulations have changed for storm water management, we've been a lot stricter on residential properties to dedicate parkland instead of money in lieu of. And just overall, the costs of building and the interest rates going up, we're seeing more and more requests for the tax incremental financing to close the financial gap. As Gary mentioned, we use our financial consultants to scrutinize the requests to make sure that, but for the use of TIF, the development wouldn't occur. That's what the state law says. So the reason the railroad tracks is included is because recently there was an inspection done, and the inspection identified some areas that the tracks needed to be maintained. Right now, nobody really owns the tracks. There was an organization that did, and what we're trying to do is get the tracks restored the way they need to be, and then figure out who's going to own and operate the tracks. We're talking to the businesses that use them. B&G is, I think, the biggest user. But we want to have the flexibility when you create these districts in order to capture public improvements, you know, in the area, so you don't have to keep amending it. I think we can only amend the TIF so many times.
4 times. You can amend the boundary 4 times. You can amend the project plan itself any number of times.
Yeah, but we typically try to include as much as we can when we're amending or creating these TIFs. So it's kind of a 101. I know it's quick and dirty, but anything I missed?
No, that was a good summary, but I just remembered something that I missed in the list of project costs. One of the other project costs that we'd like to include here is to do a master plan for the rest of the business park. So the business park has been developing kind of incrementally, and as land is added, you know, a manufacturer will go to the property owner and acquire the land, and then it gets brought in. But there's no real, and the rest of that area to the north is designated for continued industrial development, but there's no real plan for what that looks like, how the roads would run through and that kind of thing. And I think having that information would really help that area to develop and for you to attract more businesses to that industrial park.
Anything from your end, Rodney, that we missed?
Nope.
So what is the role of the Plan Commission here?
So the role of the Plan Commission in this case is, so there's two parts of what's going on. You have a TIF request, and then you have the creation or the amendment of the TID in order to fulfill that TIF request. The Finance Committee will be reviewing the TIF request itself, but the amendment of the boundary and the project plan requires the Plan Commissions to be involved in the process. So it's the Plan Commission that develops the planning document and the TID amendment plan, and then the City Council, and you hold the public hearing on that, and then the City Council gives it the final approval.
And then it also goes through the Joint Review Board.
Right. The Joint Review Board are representatives of all those overlying taxing jurisdictions that the mayor was talking about, and they have a say in this as well. They get to review this before the public hearing is held, and then they get the final say into whether they believe this is something that benefits the public interest. And so that happens after the City Council approves the resolution. So we're expecting to have 3 meetings with the Plan Commission. This would be the first one, just to give the general overview. The next one will be a discussion of the finances. And then the third one is the public hearing. And following the public hearing, then there'll be a resolution for the Plan Commission to adopt, recommending the adoption by the council.
All right. So we're expecting the amendment for TID 6. We're expecting something for what would be number 10. Is that STI?
It would be if that's the recommendation from Ellers to create a new TIF.
At some point, possibly, and then this downtown one. So potentially there'll be 3 of them in the next year.
Yep.
That we know about.
That one's the next one on the agenda.
Yeah.
The mixed-use one is.
Yep, the STI is the next one. So that's kind of what's going on, but I think the purpose was to at least get familiar with Gary. We've asked Gary to help with our TIF districts, number 1, because he's done it, he has the experience, he's good at what he does. Number 2, we have capacity issues. You know, for us to be able to do it itself, there's just not enough hours in the day for us. Gary's reimbursed either through cost reimbursement agreements with the developer and or TIF eligible expenses. So really the taxpayers aren't directly paying for him, it's the development that's paying for him. So it's not really a budgetary item for us, but he gets paid, so that's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
But having somebody with his knowledge and expertise on board is really beneficial for us. And if he hasn't seen it, it probably hasn't happened yet, right?
Well, I don't know about that. But we can move right into the STI,
Okay.
Unless there's any more questions on the TID 6.
Go ahead.
And this is just an update again, that there's no action tonight. That there may be at the next meeting, there may be a CSM, but this development is at CARPC on Thursday night for approval of the Urban Service Amendment. And then they expect to do a CSM for just the headquarters part of the development, headquarters and right-of-way. So, and that's what we may see at the August Plan Commission meeting. At the same time, STI also submitted a TIF request. Theirs is a lot more complicated because it's a mixed-use development and it's a large area with different types of uses and lots of considerations to be made. So we've asked Ellers to look at this situation, and I expect that they'll be coming back with a suggestion to phase this so that maybe the first TIF that's created is for the headquarters building, while we have time to process and think through the rest of that development. So we'll see where that goes, but we'll have more information at the August meeting.
All right, we've asked Gary to basically, for that project, not only to do the TIF, but to be the project manager as well. So he's kind of wearing multiple hats on that one because it's a big, complicated project, but it's a good problem to have, and having Gary here makes me sleep better at night anyway.
It's an important project for the city too. Yeah. It's hugely important.
Yeah.
You have a fly in here.
Yeah, it was over here earlier.
We shoot it your way.
Yeah. All right, any questions on any of this? Hopefully you find that recap beneficial. And even if you've gone through it, having reminders and reviews isn't necessarily a bad thing. That takes us to future agenda items. Do we have anything?
I think Gary just suggested a couple that will be related to the TIF. We'd expect some action items related to the STI development, and the CSM, rezoning, those types of things will come forward. You had a preliminary plat tonight. We'll ultimately see a final plat related to that, both for the condominium arrangements as well as the one in the 51 West. That's actually a platting process. A final plat will come here in the future as well. So, number of items that'll come back.
Yeah, we may see something come back for Kettle Park West too, right? For those multi-unit.
Very possible. Yep.
Yep.
We're expecting to, actually. I don't mean
Yeah.
very possible. We're expecting to.
Yeah, based on what happened at the council and some of the feedback that they received here, they're working on that plan as well. So we'll be busy, but we appreciate all the extra effort you guys are putting in. It was a big agenda tonight. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I'll second.
Second by Caravello. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
There you go.